Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your morning briefing for Monday, the 28th of July, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. Welcome to the start of a new week, everyone. Let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway, Robert. Good morning to you as well. All right, let's start with this latest OFAC designation here.
Good morning, Mike. So Friday, the Treasury Department, their Office of Foreign Assets Control, announced actually sanctions and a terrorist designation for what's called the Cartel de los Soles, or the Cartel of the Suns. And they said this is because this group is a Venezuela-based criminal group headed by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and other high-ranking government officials. And according to OFAC, they've provided material support to at least the Sinaloa cartel and Tren de Aragua. And then Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso, he's a Wyoming Republican, he said that Senate Democrats have been filibustering all of President Trump's nominees, and they're blocking all civilian appointees from being confirmed through either a voice vote or unanimous consent, which is effectively allows the Senate to kind of quickly pass or quickly confirm these nominees. And they're getting ready to head to the August recess like the House, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune said that he is considering President Trump's request to actually delay the Senate's August recess to confirm a backlog that right now is sitting at 144 nominations.
Yeah, just hang on real quick, Robert. The latest that I saw from Thune is that he said he was not going to allow President Trump's recess appointments. So, my understanding, when the Senate is out, the president can say, well, if there's no Senate to confirm who I want, so we're going to do recess appointments. Have you seen that, or is that still the case?
I think that's why he said he's considering delaying the recess, because what the Senate has been doing for at least since the beginning of the first Trump administration has been holding pro forma sessions where basically they have someone come in and gavel the Senate in while everyone is in reality out at recess in order to prevent exactly that, because the confirmation process is really a major power of the Senate, and I think they are concerned that Trump would just slam through as many appointees as possible during recess.
Yeah, I don't understand this. I mean, these are Republican senators who, and a Trump administration that's over 6 months into the first term. I mean, that's like a substantial portion. So I just don't understand what the problem is here with. Okay, I understand Democrats have been filibustering the Trump's nominees. Got it. Okay, political warfare, kind of by the book resistance type stuff. But on the flip side, I would not expect. Well, Robert, I don't want to get too in the weeds of this, but I just have a hard time understanding why.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with these many Republican senators are concerned about who Trump would nominate or nominate through the recess appointment process, because it's still, frankly, probably a major obstacle for Trump is resistance to his administration from within the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that. All right, let's go ahead and move on here to these foreign TCOs.
So there was a report that came out late last week from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and they looked at what's called the Special Immigrant Juvenile Program, which was started in 1990. And according to their investigation, more than half of applicants in 2024 were actually over the age of 18. Many that came into the U.S. through this program did so without any kind of inspection by CBP or DHS. And they came from countries that posed a major national security concern. And according to this report, many of them were also engaged in agent identity fraud. And the report identified at least 853 known or suspected members of foreign gangs and transnational criminal organizations that entered the U.S. under this program, including MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Mm-hmm. And this report only covers from fiscal year 2013 to February 2025, so it's missing 23 years, or they didn't look at up to 23 years of this program's existence. And while obviously it was probably vulnerable to this type of identity and age fraud and abuse during that time period, I think, as we reported on over the last couple of years, the Biden administration's lax enforcement and some of the actions taken by DHS, I think, effectively opened the floodgates to this type of fraud and abuse between 2021 and 2025.
All right. So if I understand it correctly, you have, I don't know, a 27-year-old man from Venezuela come to the United States and say, "Oh, I'm a poor 17-year-old orphan. Let me in." And they just said, "Oh, 17-year-old orphan. Yeah, come on in."
Correct. And as far as I understand, that actually some of these people were adults that were going to live with family members or sponsors they were being placed with, and they were. So I think part of this was supposed to be covering unaccompanied minors, and the unaccompanied minors were being placed with family members.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on here. One of the things we've talked about for, I don't know, there have been several instances over the past couple of months of Chinese nationals bringing in wheat blight and all sorts of potential bioagents into the United States from abroad. This latest case, though, involves Romania.
Yeah, this DHS said over the weekend that they detected a traveler coming from Romania attempting to bring in cherries that were infected with the European fruit fly. And DHS ag specialists, they said that this is the most serious pest for cherry crops in Europe. And I thought, interestingly, this person they said was traveling from Romania. Their in destination was Fish Creek, Wisconsin, which is a major U.S. cherry production region. So I didn't see DHS didn't provide any other information about the traveler, whether they were Romanian national or Chinese national that happened to be traveling from Romania, but they were moving through the same airport, the Michigan Metro Airport in Detroit as the other events or other incidents. So I think that there's a good possibility here that it's not a coincidence that this person was traveling with a bioagent through that airport to a major cherry production region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm unfamiliar with Fish Creek, but why fly into Detroit and not say, Madison or Green Bay or to Wisconsin? I don't know. Hey, also, just looking at this, it's not outside the realm of possibility that, at some point, if you're China, you stop sending Chinese nationals to do this and you just start paying other foreigners, $500, $1,000 here. Here's a bag of cherries. Go bring this to, when you exit the airport, there's a car waiting for you. Drop off the cherries, hop on your return flight, and here's your cash.
Yeah, I think that's a non-zero probability because the last two major incidents were Chinese nationals that worked at the University of Michigan, and after getting caught twice, I imagine the Chinese intelligence services would think that they would need an alternative to get away from additional scrutiny being placed on Chinese nationals traveling with these bioagents.
Mm-hmm. By the way, give those DHS guys in Detroit a gold star on the fridge for catching all these bioagents or potential bioagents. Alarming news, and you do have to wonder. You say, okay, well, they're obviously catching some. What are they not catching? Also a little concerning. All right, let's move on to this strike here at this Boeing facility.
So Boeing said they're preparing for a work strike at their production hub in St. Louis, Missouri. And this is after the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers local shop voted to reject a new contract offer. A 7-day cooling off period did start this morning and will basically require the union to wait 7 days to actually go on strike. But Boeing said that they are not scheduling any further negotiations with the union, which means a strike in 7 days is likely. And the last strike at Boeing production facilities was actually just last year that ended on the election day. And that lasted 53 days. And that was the same union the same union and the employees that they cover in Oregon, Washington, California.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what's made at this Boeing facility in St. Louis?
I think this is one of the main hubs for their airliners, which is the Oregon, Washington, California plant. I think we're making parts for their airliners, and this is the actual assembly plant.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Also, let's move over to ICE support. I saw last week, and this is just an unconfirmed report. The Pentagon or the ICE may be requesting, DHS may be requesting up to 20,000 National Guardsmen to be mobilized in support of ICE operations. Looks like we're seeing another batch headed directly for ICE support. What's the latest?
This was an announcement directly from the Department of Defense, and they said they're going to move 1,200 current National Guard troops and 500 additional troops that will be activated from Title 10 to Title 32 status. And what that means is they're moving from direct federal control back to state control, but with federal funding. So these additional 500 National Guard troops will remain under their state governor's control. Just they'll have an additional boost in funding, and they're also going to send all the active duty Marine and Navy personnel that have been working with ICE back to their duty stations.
Mm-hmm.
DoD said the reason for this is because the duties that these National Guard or these troops that are supporting ICE they're gonna have much more direct interactions with detainees now, and they want to move them to Title 32 status to avoid issues with federal troops performing law enforcement functions, basically.
Mm-hmm. And do you know which state this is? It's got to be a red state.
I didn't see a specific state in the announcement. I think they are. The last announcement for troops that were going to be doing support were, I think, here in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas. So they're probably going to be asking those state governments to effectively bring those National Guard troops into a state active status under Title 32.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. And with that, let's go and move into the global sit rep. Jared, let's start off with this. It's funny. The UK says we're ready to go fight. And you look at the military and you say, probably not. But what's the latest?
Yeah. Gotta agree there. So this is coming from the UK Defense Secretary, John Healey, during his visit to the HMS Prince of Wales, their carrier strike group that's down in Australia for Talisman Sabre. He was asked, hey, what's the UK doing to help Taiwan prepare for a Chinese escalation? And his immediate response was, if we had to fight, as we have done in the past, Australia and the UK are nations that will fight together. So confirming two nations, and one of them not quite his own, he did immediately backpedal, saying, oh, well, this is in general terms, and we prefer all disputes to be resolved diplomatically. So it kind of seems like he had a bit of a slip of the tongue there, confirming we will materially contribute, not just economically contribute to a war effort in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Moving over to Israel. Israel announced it's going to cease all military operations in Gaza from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. local time each day to focus on humanitarian aid. This is a pretty stark shift from what we were told by Israel, that they were going to clear everybody out, resettle a whole bunch of new spots. And Israel's finance minister described the shift as a new strategy without any further elaboration. He even said this is not the time to discuss additional details. So they appear to have some follow-on steps involved, but they're not going to talk about them. And that this whole thing is going to be tested by Hamas's decisions and reactions to this. So it seems like they're taking a softer stance just to see what Hamas does. Just frankly, I'm going to treat this as a developing situation because this is not matching what Israel's stated goals were.
And their stated goals were occupation and rebuilding Gaza under Israeli annex, correct?
Yeah. Clear out the residents of Gaza and resettle 22 new settlements. And the guy even in charge of it was rather upset about that. So I'm not sure what exactly is happening there. I will be keeping a much closer eye on this to see what exactly Israel is doing here.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So moving over to Austria, this is coming from the Austrian foreign minister from 2017 to 2019. She said over the weekend that Russia can veto any Austrian vote to join NATO. Pretty bold claim. But her argument stems from the fact that Russia is the legal successor to the Soviet Union and that the Soviet Union ratified a neutrality amendment into Austria's sovereignty treaty with France, the UK, and the US in 1955. So basically, in order to join NATO and break neutrality, they would have to have total consensus of all four of those states. I'm not familiar with the Austrian legal code, so I'm going to take her word at this, that this is at least something to be questioned. And it does worry me because the Ukraine's potential accession to NATO has been a real big sticking point for Russia this entire time since 2022.
Mm-hmm. Is Austria talking about joining NATO?
I haven't seen any talks from them, but at the same time, they're also surrounded by NATO members. So they de facto have NATO security. But if Russia wanted to, I guess they could veto. again, one more thing I'll be keeping a much closer eye on, because if Russia says no and they actually have standing, then what else can they use to what can they use that to then affect? Did they have any other similar treaties with other nations that were in the Soviet bloc? I don't know.
All right. And then one of the big things that we've seen so far under the Trump administration is BlackRock has been successfully buying some of these Chinese controlling interests in ports around the world. And I don't know. It's like BlackRock or China. Who do you really want owning the ports? At any rate, someone's got to own them. Yeah. And so what's the latest? Because it looks like they are looking at maybe another port deal. The Chinese are.
Yes. So there were a lot of rumors coming out last week from American sources saying, hey, yeah, the Chinese want a Chinese company in there, but nobody had confirmed it. The foreign minister refused to comment on it. Here's C.K. Hutchison, the Hong Kong firm that's actually selling these ports to BlackRock, confirmed, yes, we are looking for what they called a major strategic investor from the People's Republic of China to be involved in the port deal. So it probably will be something like Costco, China's state-owned shipping corporation.
And this is at the Panama Canal.
This is not just the Panama Canal. It's dozens of ports, but they have not released the total port list. The two big ones are on either side of the Panama Canal, giving you de facto control over it. But there are dozens of ports around the world that they would also hand over.
Mm-hmm. And then just as a reminder, this is kind of a big deal because if Chinese companies own these ports or controlling interests in the ports, then they will have a say on which countries, which flagged vessels can enter these ports, and could be a huge economic challenge for the United States at some point, correct?
Yes, and they would get control over, or at least a say in, does anybody get a free pass? Do we, just say, hey, well, you're providing security, so we'll waive the fees? They would get a say in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, and then finally, let's go ahead and talk about this Chinese research vessel. Now, this was in the Is this correct? This was in the U.S. economic zone, exclusive economic zone?
Yes. Quick caveat with that, the exclusive economic zones run out 200 miles. So saying that somebody's in there, it's not saying like they're on the coast.
It's still international water. Is that?
Yeah. Correct? Yeah. Anything outside of 12 miles is international water. It's just that right now, like the EEZs are only able to be exploited by the people that own them, but they are still, you can travel internationally. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. Coast Guard reported that they spotted an icebreaker from the Polar Research Institute of China. Actually, you can see it pictured here. Now, this was on the U.S. extended continental shelf. This was all on Saturday, which the continental shelf is a different. It's always falls within the EEZs, but that is where you really want to look for like minerals, stuff like that. Now, the vessel was not reported to be violating any laws or norms, but the Coast Guard did say that they must respond to foreign government vessel activity in and near U.S. waters, including the continental shelves. And that's coming from the U.S. commander of the U.S. Coast Guard Arctic District. Now, this isn't unheard of. The Chinese do occasionally go up there, but it is not a common occurrence at all.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then, so, just looking at this ship, are they scanning the seabed? I mean, what possibly could they be doing up there?
That is my assumption, is that they are just trying to figure out either what the lay of the land is up there, for the turn of phrase, or actually figuring out what's down on the bed. Because you can see it, there are not a lot of antennas up there. This is not a SIGINT ship. So it's not like they're going to look at Kodiak or check out all the bases around the coast of Alaska. It does look like this is truly a research vessel, but all of that information will get filtered back to the central government of China.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Jared. And with that, 39 protests today, about baseline. All right, let's go ahead and move on and talk about this blockade that was going on back in Portland. This ran for about 10 days. They actually blockaded. So my understanding is that no ICE officers came or went from this facility for about 10 days. Maybe with the exception of a couple of cases where DHS actually had to arrive at this ICE facility and escort ICE employees to their vehicles in the parking lot. So after a series of daily protests, you do have some activists and militants. Again, this is in mid-June. decide to set up a blockade outside this ice facility in Portland, Oregon. And there's a blog post with a report back from on the ground witness describing the conditions during this 10-day blockade. And it has since been, it continues on as an encampment. My understanding is that the facility is just no longer blockaded. So this encampment grew to 80 plus tents, maybe as many as 100. You've got about at its height, about 1,000 activists and militants who showed up there. And these volunteers set up a large kitchen. That's a pretty much a mainstay of these large encampments. But they cook food, they take in food and water, they dole it out, they make sure that protesters have food and water, et cetera. They set up a medical tent, which again is pretty standard. They established an access control point. So this was not something where just anyone, well, I guess anyone could show up, but as I understand it, you actually have to go through somewhat of a gate in order to join the occupation. And then they also developed a communications team and an engineering team. And so this engineering team was responsible for building the blockades and building the encampment fortifications. They were using furniture and wooden pallets. The report back doesn't say anything about the comms team. My guess is that's probably not going to be radios like Baofeng's transmitting in the clear. It is probably going to be something on Signal or Telegram or some other app on a communications device. That said, DHS officers eventually did tear down part of the fortifications outside the ICE facility, and they did that in order to reopen the entrance. Then occupants, of course, partially rebuilt part of those fortifications. Now, the bottom line on this is that, this is probably a model. I mean, you just look at this. It is a model for other parts of the country. And I say that with a caveat. And the caveat is these occupations exist because local leaders allow them to exist. One of the things that you should have noticed, I noticed from the campus occupations that were going on over the past couple of years, is that when local authorities enforce local laws, when they go in and they make arrests of people who are violating those laws, and then when they follow through with those charges, they have been effective in shutting down those campus occupations. I forget exactly the time frame because these months just all blend in together. However, the campus occupations, just over a period of a couple of months, they folded very rapidly across the United States. And the ones that continued to exist did so because campus administrators allowed them to exist. So all the direct action, the occupations, the fighting with campus authorities, campus police, all that was because administrators just simply didn't take a stand. So, this is a case where obviously the city of Portland allows this to continue. And I bring this up because maybe we could see an effort to blockade an ICE facility in New York. Remember Tom Homan, Robert, do you remember what Tom Homan's official title is? He was the border czar, and now he's something else. Immigration czar, I don't know.
Yeah, as far as I understand, he's still like a special advisor to the president on immigration.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, he is that. So he was saying last week that they're getting ready to flood the zone in New York, ICE, DHS, et cetera, getting ready to flood the zone in New York. So this is something we'll be paying close attention to, and we are going to get set up to kind of do a battle update brief, a bub, if you will, when New York pops off. I'm not 100% sure, obviously, that they're going to choose the LA riot route, but New York is a tier 1 city. They are clearly capable of doing Portland and LA type things, have done that a lot in the past. And they have a sizable far left contingent. So it's something I consider this your early warning, if you will. With that, let's go ahead and move on here to the United States and Japan preparing for nuclear threats in a Taiwan contingency. Jared, sounds serious.
Yes, actually very. So over the weekend, anonymous Japanese government officials revealed to their media some details from the extensive nuclear umbrella talks that we covered last year. So these are new details from an old meeting. But during a tabletop exercise on a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, The Japanese self-defense forces requested the United States mirror all Chinese nuclear threats against Japan, and the U.S., after several times saying no, did eventually comply, but they ended up not simulating use of nuclear weapons from either China or the United States. Now, the important part there is that they expect China to initiate nuclear threats against Japan in a Taiwan invasion scenario. So in this 2027 window that we are looking at, nuclear war is very much on the table as far as everybody's concerned. The US and Japan also officially named China as the enemy for the 2024 Keen Edge exercise, which was likely the unnamed exercise prior, for the first time. Normally, you don't do that. You may run a nation's order of battle, but you do not name them. That is because they're probably being monitored. That's an incredibly important detail. They are just saying, yes, China would probably know, you can probably see us. We are officially naming you as an enemy. Mm-hmm. Keen Edge also saw the United States set up bases on the islands closest to Taiwan with Japanese self-defense forces support. So we've covered that the Japanese are, actually building a logistics network. Well, here's what that's for. It's not just for evacuation. It's to actually help set up a proper base on all of those islands, including Okinawa. Mm-hmm. Now, Keen Edge, just for those who don't know, that's a command level exercise. So they're, actually operating, okay, where are our big strategic moves here? And it's always followed up by Keen Sword 6 months later. And that's to put the lessons into practice. So Keen Sword 2024, the follow-on to Keen Edge, likely practiced all of this. Thus, the U.S. and Japan are basically conducting dry runs on what their actual roles are going to be in a Taiwan contingency. And to date, we've seen Japan say, the status quo is key to our national security. That's in their national security strategy now. We want to maintain the status quo. We don't want Taiwan to be independent or to be under China. No. What we're seeing here is probably the most explicit statement of involvement that Japan has given in a defense of Taiwan scenario, because they are saying, we are preparing for this. We're preparing to potentially be nuked again. And we're having our main security guarantor be prepared to nuke in response. Those are incredible statements via action. Now, following on, I think anytime we discuss 2027 and the potential Chinese blockade, quarantine, takeover of Taiwan, we should be prepared to hear serious nuclear threats from China on Japan, if not the United States, and a retaliatory threat from the United States onto China.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jared, you know a lot more about Chinese nuclear doctrine than me, but my understanding, like we see with Russian nuclear doctrine, violations of territorial integrity are a red line for the use of nuclear weapons. So this is a case where maybe there's not just an implied threat, but there's an explicit threat to Japan. Really, if you're China and you want to deter this U.S. coalition, sure seems like nuclear weapons are one way to do that.
It sure does. And that's something that's always stuck out as kind of a gray area to me, because China does say, you violate our territorial integrity, we'll use nukes. That's very common. And they say Taiwan is part of their territory, but they don't currently act like it is part of their territory. So it's will they, won't they? Not really sure. At the very least, the U.S. and Japan believe that there's enough of a threat to take it seriously that they will try to nuke Japan again. Mm-hmm. And that would be the Chinese taking the bet that the United States will not back up Japan in a nuclear exchange.
Mm-hmm. All right. It's going to be interesting. Thanks for that, Jared. Thanks for staying on top of this. This is, it's funny, we've been just talking about this for years and years, and there is an element of like, okay, nothing ever happens. Nothing's going to happen. But it sure seems like we're obviously not to this point of escalation, although the risk is high. And Jared, would you say that misreading intent of these exercises at this point is probably the highest risk activity? Maybe ramming or something like that, maybe live fire exercises. But, it sure seems like there's not an imminent risk that the United States and China go to war, but we could stumble into it by accident through misunderstanding what, each other's military exercises are actually doing.
I think so. Yeah, that it's really just, okay. And actually, that may even be why these Japanese officials are coming out, because normally the Japanese are pretty good about this kind of stuff. They don't talk about it. I mean, they held it in for a year, and now they're releasing it. Kind of odd, but it may be that we're not necessarily the audience, but the Chinese are the audience, saying, "Look, we are discussing this. This is not about what we're doing to deter you, and maybe you saw it. No, we're telling you, do not do this. We are prepared for nuclear war over Taiwan." That could easily be, this could be an event to make sure China is not misunderstanding, and also make sure that everybody that's in the coalition, which we've covered both the core and the outer coalition members, make them understand that this is a serious threat, that, the strong horse is here and it's not China.
That's been a big thing for just kind of U.S. foreign policy, basically, is strategic clarity. This is our desired end state, or this is what we are going to accomplish. Be very clear with China. This is what is going to happen at the strategic level, but being operationally ambiguous. Leave it up to China's imagination to figure out how we're going to do this, but just know that we are going to do this. And it sure seems like that's been a fairly effective way to have China understand what we want, and be a little more secure about not telegraphing exactly how we're going to do it with China.
Yes, I
do
want to,
with the exception of a couple of things, but one of the things is that talking about nuclear defense is obviously part of that, is giving some clarity to otherwise operational ambiguity, especially on the nuclear front. But it sure seems like you've got to be very clear when you talk about the use of nuclear weapons.
Yes. I do want to point out that they're so everybody likes to focus on the subs and the ICBMs and really go, okay, yeah, these are the big ones. The subs are primarily second strike, but the ICBMs, you get a warning way off. One thing that happened extremely recently that I think would play into this and really probably set China on its heels is that Operation Midnight Hammer. You ran a totally a totally unforeseen, unintercepted bombing mission from Missouri successfully, and then ran them back, and they got home in time for lunch the next day. Like, China's, compared to what China was 15 years ago, they're phenomenal. But are they as good as the United States is? That's the real question. Could China intercept that? I don't think so. I don't think they could guarantee it, because Iran used a lot of Chinese tech and they didn't see it. And I think that right there, is it operational ambiguity? Not as much, but at the very least, you now have a test case to say, hey, they were able to pull that off. Iran wasn't able to see it with the stuff we give them. Can we do it? Could we actually stop them from coming in and giving us a nuke if we decided to nuke Japan? That's going to set China back on its heels a lot when they start putting all these pieces together. And I think what that does is try to push that window back, because we talked about their really strong demographic crisis that's going to hit in the 30s. So if you can just push that window back by 2-3 years, they're going to be in a really hard time to have any kind of actual military effort.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, lots more to come. Thanks for that, Jared. This is very interesting and also slightly concerning. All right. And I think we do have some questions today. Hearing national security concerns over the T-app data leak. Are you guys following this? Just wondering. Thank you. I don't know, Robert. I'm not following it, but I did see it. It's funny. When some apps require, like for KYC, like know your customer laws, like Coinbase and other things, they do require a government ID. So you have to upload a photo of both sides of your government ID. And they say, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Within 24 hours, we're gonna delete this, or 7 days, or whatever." And you say, "Well, okay, yeah, I don't know about that." T didn't delete this stuff. It was on a folder, apparently not even password protected, just sitting on the internet. And now you've got thousands. I don't know even how many of pictures of women using this T app. Now, if I understand this correctly, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, but T was an app set up so women could get on there and go through the confirming their identity process, and then describe the dates or rate the dates that they had with specific men by name. And so if you're going on a date with so-and-so, you get on the T app and you look at his Amazon customer reviews, essentially. Is that
Correct.
basically? Okay. All right. What have you, so I definitely outside the realm of Forward Observer. However, this does potentially have national security concerns because there were some government IDs that were on there. Then you have geodata, so location for these women using this app. If they're using this app at work and they work in government, well, now their names, their identities, their photos, their location history, I guess, are just spilled, correct?
Correct. And I did see that at least one of those people's geolocation was on an Air Force base that is apparently very restricted access from the flight line, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's probably not a place I want someone on a cell phone on a dating app, a dating review app. All right. Anything else to add there? Yeah, I know other people have covered it, but yeah, just in terms of national security concerns.
I just think possibly the, either identity theft of people who have access to certain information or facilities, or blackmail in some cases. It does probably present that threat.
Mm-hmm. Sure makes the spotting and assessing phase of recruitment maybe a little bit easier. Like for espionage. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. And I do want to, let me just cover, Jared, this comment right here. King Doe says there has been a change in thinking with nuclear doctrine. Limited strategic use is becoming more acceptable by the main powers. Well, I think you're probably right. I talk about this acquaintance / friend of mine who was founded a hedge fund and retired from it not too long ago. But he sent me this PDF and he said, Mike, you need to read this. And I've been reading through it. It's called Limited Nuclear War in the 21st Century. I've actually still got it up here. You should probably read that. Limited Nuclear War in the 21st Century. Maybe I'll do a Cliff Notes on it for Forward Observer subscribers. I'll also post this PDF in the library. You should read it. Jared, Robert, are y'all familiar with that? Have you read that kind of essay thing yet?
Not yet.
No, but I did see a lot of discussion around exactly this issue when India and Pakistan were going at it, because effectively they would not cause a global nuclear issue. They would cause a very regional one. And what that would potentially do is confirm the ideas behind limited nuclear exchange. And that was not received well by most of the people. In fact, it's probably why the great powers stepped in so forcefully and said, we need to stop this right now. Because if you confirm this, now we have to build an escalation ladder where maybe we send you a nuke, maybe we eat a nuke, but we don't do a full nuclear exchange.
Mm-hmm. So it's not mutually assured destruction with the Soviet Union then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, please tee up another question for us. Let's just do maybe like 2 or 3 more. All right. With the government push into rare earth production in the U.S., does that cover only the mining of them, or does it also cover onshoring of the environmentally problematic refining steps? Robert, this is a great question for you. We do have some rare earth metals and minerals here in the United States. My understanding is that we don't have the refining to match it.
Correct. And I did see, as part of that recent influx in investments in these rare earth minerals, there does seem to be some money going toward that refining. So far, I think the only money coming, I think Microsoft was one of those big investors recently, is in recycling. So taking, current IT, information technology equipment, and recycling the rare earth metals out of it. But that I think is a big push, because the Trump administration has said that they recognize that the refining is actually a major bottleneck for U.S. supply chains. And I think that is eventually coming. We might even see something like what the DoD did recently with MP materials in California, where they'll start trying to push public capital into some of this refining capacity.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, I'm sure lots more to come on that as well. Yeah, it just makes no sense. If I can just say, just real quick, back when I was at jury duty a couple weeks ago, I heard this woman. We were sitting on the bench, just waiting, waiting for the lawyers and the judge to do whatever they do, and this woman was talking about the Trump tariffs, and she was an NPR American, so that was her angle, and she was just talking to this woman right next to me, and she said, "Oh, the Trump tariffs, going nuts about it, like Trump doesn't know what he's doing, and it's whatever. Oh, imagine what that's going to do to copper prices." And I leaned over, maybe I shouldn't have. I leaned over, I said, "Ma'am, do you know how many copper smelters the United States has in this country?" Because she had just gotten done talking about how important copper is and how important copper prices are, and if copper prices go up, how that's going to affect the U.S. economy. I just asked her, "Do you know how many copper smelters the United States has?" No, obviously, no clue. We've got 2, maybe 3. Otherwise, we can mine as much copper as we want. We're extremely limited in our ability to actually produce usable copper in finished products like pipes and wiring. The majority of that stuff happens overseas in China. So she just no clue on the second order thinking of what the tariffs are intended to do, which is to economically incentivize a lot more production and refining here at home of really mission critical items that this country needs to run on. So with that, I'll just say one thing the Trump administration, I don't know if it's, well, Robert, I want to get your take on this. Sorry, but I don't know if it's a failure of, obviously it's a failure of the media to explain kind of the strategic thinking. Maybe it's also a little bit of a failure of strategic messaging, because unless you have seen one of these Scott Bessent interviews, you have probably not heard this strategy articulated very clearly. At least I haven't, from elsewhere in the Trump administration. But do you have any observations you'd like to share?
No, I think that's correct, is that there's a messaging issue here. I think it's even been pointed out by people who say that Trump, there's been a couple articles over the last few months from economists saying that, well, Trump is right about tariffs. He's just a messaging problem. And I think that's true, because basically to get the playbook that it seems like Trump is going by, both economic statecraft, tariffs, and money wise, as far as like foreign capital, you have to kind of dig for that. You have to go find Stephen Mirren, one of Trump's economic advisors. You have to go find his paper, which is publicly available, but you have to go out of your way to get to it. You have to go search out Michael Every and search out comments from Scott Bessent on what this overall strategy is. You have to go search out to learn about what the Mar-a-Lago Accord is. This is not something that the Trump administration seems to be effectively messaging. They're just putting out very simply, well, tariffs are going to bring jobs back. And there are a lot of people racing to explain why they think that's incorrect, or, it's incorrect that it's going to reshore production. But I think if you were to actually dig into a lot of these things that we've covered, you would find that people like Michael Every and Stephen Mirren have pretty clearly laid out the playbook Trump is following. And I think with that EU trade deal announcement that came out over the weekend, where it's kind of a Rorschach test for pro-Trump and anti-Trump people, but very clearly the EU agreed to a trade deal where they basically they have a 50% tariff levied on all exports into the United States, and we have 0 tariffs on our side of U.S. exports into the EU. That falls right along this playbook that Trump has been following, based just on all of these things that you kind of have to dig for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I haven't even looked at the EU deal. As I understand it, Trump announced it over the weekend. Like I saw something about it last night, for instance. Okay. Well, that's a really big deal. Let's talk maybe more about that tomorrow. Jared, let's do 1 or 2 other questions here, please. If nukes are deployed over Taiwan, where does your analysis point towards them targeting military or civilian targets? I would have to think they got to be military targets, probably major airfields, naval ports. Jared, I don't know what else.
That would be my assumption too, just because it's a nuke. Everybody's really touchy about that, so you pretty much have to try to avoid civilian casualties with it as much as possible. So hit a primarily military target. You cannot hit Yokosuka, the main naval base in Japan, because that's next to Tokyo. But you try to hit those. And China also, like we covered the ag terrorism again today, and that's really how they would want to affect civilians instead of hitting a nuke. Is hey, make it harder for somebody to eat. Don't nuke them. Just make it harder for them to even do their job. That's nukes are military. You try to use other means to dissuade a populace.
Sure. Yeah, nukes are a very direct form of warfare. The Chinese bioagent stuff, that's indirect, that's asymmetric warfare, and that really is probably what you levy against critical infrastructure and civilian populace. And I would just remind everyone as well, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but you go back and you read that unrestricted warfare manual that was published by the Chinese back in the 1990s, and they say very clearly the strategy is to force the United States into a strategic dilemma where U.S. leaders have to choose national survival over their geopolitical or geostrategic aims, basically trading the safety and security of the United States homeland for Chinese control of Taiwan. And I think China's probably prepared, maybe, to put that offer into reality.
Yeah.
By the way, I do have that. If you want my Cliff Notes, I provide a chapter-by-chapter summary with also my thoughts in there. That's available to Forward Observer subscribers. Head over to forwardobserver.com, forwardobserver.com. That's our website. Come join us. It's our news and intelligence platform. We've got a library that's expanding. So if you're interested in government and military documents, stuff the DOD and other places are putting out, come join us. I'm getting ready to announce a whole new expansion thing on that. Join early. Forwardobserver.com. Start a free 7-day trial. Get access to our report in text. We send it out via email. Also, we're publishing intel reports to the site. And of course, we have the watch floor. So we're posting news and intel updates throughout the day as well there. Forwardobserver.com. Thank you, CMD. All right, Jared, with that, any other really good questions?
Nope. Actually, we kind of answered some of them. I do want to throw out one little point with the nukes, though. One thing that people don't take into account, I looked into the UN nuclear watchdogs prior to coming on to Forward Observer to just kind of get an idea of what this all looked like. And when you see, the U.S. has 3,000 nukes or China's developing 1,000 nukes, they're talking about warheads, and everybody should be familiar with the MIRV, the multiple reentry vehicles. Each one of those counts as one warhead. So if you have a 10 nuke MIRV, you have 10 nukes in there. That actually severely limits how, considering they're all in a single delivery vehicle, that severely limits how you can actually distribute those. And in order to, the rule of thumb for any kind of shooting is that you shoot twice. That way you really confirm your hits. So if you're dropping 20 nukes out of your pool of 600 for China's current estimate, that's a lot to drop all at once. And they're not all these, city killing nukes. They're relatively small, designed to destroy a wide area, but not a wide area together, but also increase your hit probability. That changes the calculus on what the targets are.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're probably not talking about Hiroshima or Nagasaki. We're talking about smaller nukes hitting airfields.
Well, I think
infrastructure.
Our smaller nukes are actually, let me double check this, but I'm pretty certain that our smaller nukes are actually comparable to that now, where it's, we say, we destroyed Nagasaki, and it did a good number on it, but it didn't annihilate. Well, it's not like it annihilated something the size of Tokyo. It annihilated a very significant population center, but it did not do the whole thing. That's really what I think we're looking at. And got to keep in mind that, something like Guam is a prime target because there's not a lot of civilian there. There's a ton of military there, and it's strategically important. You drop 2-3 of those launch vehicles on there with up to 30 nukes, maybe do 2 MIRVs and a big one. Now, okay, good luck getting your ships over here. We nuked you, and are you going to nuke us over Guam?
So I guess that explains the rush to put air defense and all these defense assets on Guam. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, among many reasons. All right, Jared, Robert, thank you. Excellent work as always. And thank you for watching. We appreciate your support. Head over to forwardobserver.com, start a free 7-day trial. Check us out, especially if you are a regular viewer. We appreciate your support. And with that, everyone, we will be back in your inbox tomorrow morning, back on this show starting at 08 Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.